Hello, I'm Valerie Pearson. I'm the author of Sugar-Free Home Preserving. And what I'm going to be talking to you about today is making a sugar-free raspberry jam. Before we get started with our jam making, I just wanted to go over what you're going to need in your kitchen to make jam successfully. The first thing is a pot with a wide base. This pot has a 32 centimeter base, and it's perfect because that means when you put a kilo of fruit in here and your other ingredients to make your jam, it's not going to be too deep, so all of it is going to get hot enough to turn it into jam within a short time period. So a nice wide pot. They used to be called preserving pans. I don't think you can find anything in a store called a preserving pan anymore, but this is what they were talking about. These are available at Green Living Australia. The other thing you're going to need is some jars to put your jam in. So I just use standard jars that are the same type of jars that are available with food already in them in the grocery store, but you want to keep the jar small. This is a 250 ml jar, and the reason you want to keep the jar small is there's not going to be a bucket load of sugar in the sugar-free jam, and sugar does act as a partial preservative, so you don't want to have a jar of jam that's so big that the jam actually won't last the amount of time that it's going to be in your fridge before you get to eat it all. Lids. I can recycle the jars again and again and again, but not the lids. The lids are going to be a one-time use lid. This is because you can damage them when getting them off, and there's also a seal on the inside that is affected by food acids, and they do break down over time. So the manufacturer only guarantees they'll work once. I have used mine more than once on a few occasions, but I make sure that I haven't damaged the lid by getting it off using a jar opener or something like that. The other thing that I find really handy is a jar funnel. So this is a jar funnel that is a wide enough opening to get your jam through, but not so wide that it's not going to fit inside the standard Australian jars. So perfect for your jam making, and the little tabs on it means that it doesn't transfer the heat from ladling hot jam into the jars, so that way you don't burn your fingers when you're moving the funnel from one jar to the other. So that's the kind of equipment that you're going to need for your jam making. You can get those at Green Living Australia, and also we have sugar-free jam making kits that you can get. So the pectin I'm going to be using is Pomona's pectin. So this is Pomona's pectin. There are two types of pectin. Now don't worry too much about the technical stuff, but the names of the pectin are high methylester pectin and low methylester pectin. High methylester pectin, you've probably seen it in grocery stores. That is the standard pectin that will be available. It needs to have 65% sugar in the final jam. So those are the jams where you put a kilo of fruit in the pot and a kilo of sugar in the pot and cook it until it gets to a 65% concentration. It takes a long time and it's full of sugar. So this is what we're trying to get away from. This is low methylester pectin, and this is the pectin that I want you to use to make sugar-free or low sugar jam. In every packet, you're going to get two things. You're going to get the pectin, okay? And then you're also going to get a packet of calcium. Now, in the instructions that come with it, it's going to say, before you start your jam making, make calcium water, which is one of the ingredients that you need to make sugar-free jam. So instead of the sugar being used to set the jam, we're going to be using calcium with the pectin to set the jam. So let's make our calcium water. Take your pack of calcium, get a 250 ml jar, and then open your calcium and tip your calcium in. There's a teaspoon of calcium powder in this packet. If you wanted to do half a jar, you could go ahead and just add half the contents of the packet, half a teaspoon, and then half a cup of water. But I make so much jam that I'm actually going to use this whole cup within a month or two. So get some water. Tap water is perfectly okay. And fill up your jar to 250 ml, which is just to the hip. You could use a measuring cup in a different size jar if you wanted to, but I find it very easy to use the 250 ml jar. Then put the lid on and give it a shake, and you've made calcium water. So now that you have your calcium water, you're ready to make your jam. So now we're ready to start making our jam. I've chosen raspberry jam. It is one of my favorite fruits. I do a lot of demonstrations and jam classes, and raspberry jam is a really good one to do then because it's very, very quick. So I've just got a kilo of frozen raspberries. I do like to use fresh raspberries when they're available, but you know that's only for a certain time of the year. So the rest of the year, if I need a little bit of raspberry hit, I go ahead and get some frozen raspberries. Pop your raspberries in and then turn on the heat and start warming it up. While you're warming up those raspberries, which is the cooking pot, you're going to go ahead and get your rest of your ingredients together. So instead of using sugar, I am going to sweeten this a little bit. You don't have to use any sweetener if you don't want to, but raspberries are a bit tart, so this jam is going to taste better if I add some sweetener. The sweetener that I have chosen today is xylitol. This is a natural product. It is from the bark of birch trees. It's not genetically modified. It doesn't have any gluten in it. It's perfectly safe for humans to use. And it's been used for over 100 years, very popular in Europe, just hasn't really become that popular here. But we are starting to pick up and use xylitol more. You probably already are consuming xylitol, you just don't know it. There's a lot of sugar-free products on the market and they do use xylitol extensively. So with the xylitol, we've got 300 grams. Now originally the recipe would have been 1 kilo of fruit to 1 kilo of sugar. I'm not going to put a kilo of xylitol in because I don't need to. Xylitol is as sweet as sugar, spoon for spoon, gram for gram, but when you are making sugar-free jam, you're only doing it to taste. You're not doing it because you have to, otherwise it won't set. So I'm going to add the pectin. Now you saw that I'm using the Pomona's pectin. I actually already have some in a jar, so I'm going to add 2 teaspoons of the pectin to my fruit, but I'm going to add it to the xylitol first and mix it in. Remember that this is a setting agent and you don't want it to set in a lump. So if you just got 2 teaspoons of pectin and plopped it right in the middle of your jam, you might end up with lumpy jam, and not in the good way, not lumps of fruit, lumps of undissolved pectin. So I'm actually adding it to my xylitol. And I'm so lazy I don't even want to put it in a bowl, so I'm just mixing it straight into the xylitol in the packet. Okay, so let's just stir this fruit around. It's just thawing out right now. Let's turn it up a little bit to get that thawing going even faster. And then go ahead and tip your xylitol in with your fruit. Okay, great. Mix that in. And give it a chance to dissolve. Now you still don't have all the ingredients that you need to make it set because pectin actually needs to have an acidic environment to set. That's why the old-fashioned recipes for jam that did have the kilo of sugar and the kilo of fruit normally had some lemon juice. So my mum used to make strawberry jam all the time and it was always a couple of tablespoons of lemon juice in the mix. What that does is it lowers the pH, which helps the pectin actually work. So I've got a lemon. I've actually already halved a lemon and squeezed some lemon juice. So I've measured out 2 tablespoons in here. So I'm going to tip that in. So what I have in the pot now is I have 1 kilo of raspberries. I have 300 grams of xylitol. I've added 2 teaspoons of the Low Methylester Pectin from Pomona's to the xylitol and popped that in. And I've added my 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. The last ingredient that I need to put in is the calcium water, which we made at the beginning of our jam making. So here's my calcium water. Now remember, the calcium doesn't dissolve. It doesn't go into a solution. It actually is going to settle to the bottom. So before you scoop out your 2 teaspoons, give it a shake. You actually don't want to just get water. You want to make sure you get calcium water. So now that I've just made sure it's shook up again, I'm putting my 2 teaspoons of calcium water in. And that's what's going to make the pectin set. Let's get that mixed in. All right, we've done everything we need to make this jam successful. Now all we need to do is let it come to the boil, and it needs to come to a full rolling boil, and it needs to boil for 1 to 2 minutes. Sometimes I let it boil for 1 minute, like if I have a batch this size, but if I wanted to double the batch, I would actually let it boil for 2 minutes. So anywhere between 1 and 2 minutes is perfect. So let's just wait for it to come to a full rolling boil. So as you'll see, it's starting to bubble, but it is not at a full rolling boil yet. If I stir it, that boil kind of disappears. So what it is it's starting to simmer, and simmer temperature is about 80 to 88 degrees. Boiling is when it gets to 100 degrees. So you need to make sure that when you stir it, it's actually still boiling afterwards. So it's going to take a while to get to a full rolling boil. Not that long, but a few minutes. Don't start counting your 1 to 2 minutes until it's actually at a full rolling boil. Okay, so now it's really starting to boil. You can actually see some foam starting, and when I stir it, it actually keeps boiling. So I'm happy now to go ahead and put my timer on for 1 to 2 minutes. So let's start counting. We've got 1 minute. Okay, our 1 minute is up. This has boiled beautifully. So now I am ready to go ahead and take this and put it in my jars. Now this is hot jam. You want to put hot jam in hot jars. So I've actually warmed these jars up so I can go ahead and put the jam right into them. I just had them upside down to, any little bits of water could drain out of them. And I'm going to ladle them in. I'm going to use my stainless steel funnel, and I've got a 240 ml ladle, which is just perfect because a ladle full is the perfect amount to put in a jar. So go ahead and put your jam in your jar. Now you want to bring it just up to the hip. You don't want to fill it all the way to the top. You don't want it to overflow. Just up to the hip, and then go ahead and move to the next one. That one's actually a little overfull, so I might pinch a little bit out of that one and put it in another jar. But that one is really perfect. And just keep going until you have filled all your jars and you have no jam left. Now I get about 5 and a bit jars out of this batch of jam, so I don't get a lot less than when I do the standard jam with the sugar. And that's because I don't have to cook this for a long time, only 1 to 2 minutes. When you have to cook jam for like half an hour, 45 minutes to get it to set, what you're doing is you're actually reducing the quantity continuously. So if I do jam where I'm using a kilo of fruit to a kilo of sugar, I get about 6 jars. When I do this jam, I get about 5 jars. So as you see, I'm really not losing a lot. Keep going. Now, I did overfill one of these jars a little bit, so most of them are pretty good, but this one's a bit overfull, so I'm just going to steal a little bit out of this one and transfer it to the next one. Okay, so I've got 5 jars, and I do have a little bit of jam left, so I can go ahead and put the last little bit of jam in this one. So let's get rid of these things I don't need anymore. Wouldn't want to waste it. It's absolutely beautiful. And I'll have to clean all that up later. So I won't get a full jar out of this one. I'll just get, I don't know, half or a third of a jar. I won't be able to process that one, but that's okay because that goes right in the fridge and I can have it tomorrow for breakfast. So once you have all your jars done, go ahead and get your lids and put your lids on. Now, if you have spilled any jar on the rim, you need to clean that off. So I've got some paper towel, and I'm just going to clean it off. The only one that actually has that problem is the one that I overfilled slightly, because when I stole a little bit of jam out of that jar to put in the other one, I did get some on the rim. So get your lids on all the jars. Finger tight, don't break your arm trying to tighten them. And then the last one, I'm going to pop a lid on that, and that one's going to go straight in the fridge. It's not actually going to be processed. So now these jars here are ready to go in the boiling water bath to be processed. So this is what I use to process my jars in what's called the boiling water bath. Full instructions about the boiling water bath are on Green Living Australia's website, so go there and check it out. That's greenlivingaustralia.com.au. What I have is just a standard stock pot, and then I take a round cake cooling rack, which I got from the dollar shop, and I pop them in the bottom. What that's going to do is that's going to hold the jars off the bottom of the pot. Rapid change in temperature of glass can cause the glass to crack, so you don't want them sitting on the bottom of the pot, which is then sitting on a hot plate. because that change in temperature could crack the jar. Now, the water in here is already hot. It's not boiling, but it is hot. And the jars are hot as well, so I'm going to use this jar lifter and go ahead and put the jars in the hot water. I've also got this turned on to a high setting because I want to actually bring it to the boil. You want the jars to be completely submerged by the water. And what's going to happen when it boils, it's going to reboil the jam in the jar. That's going to create steam. Then the air and the steam is going to get pushed out of the jar. The lid acts like a one-way valve, so it doesn't let any air or steam back in the jar. That creates a vacuum. There's no air left in the jar. There's a vacuum seal, and because there's no air left in the jar, there's no microbes that can grow something on top of your jam. Remember, this jam doesn't have any sugar in it, so there's nothing acting as any kind of preservative at all. So if you do not do the boiling water bath, your jam at room temperature is going to have something growing on top of it within a week. In the fridge, once it's open, it's going to last about a month. In the pantry, after you've done the boiling water bath, it will last indefinitely. Remember, Louis Pasteur's experiments are still going, so the food that he made, that he put in a vacuum, is still okay today. So let's leave this until it comes to a full rolling boil, and then we time it for 10 minutes. So it's come to a rolling boil, and I've put a timer on to time for 10 minutes and gone off and made myself a cup of tea. It's actually just come up to the 10 minutes now, so we are ready to take them out. But I want you to make sure that you understand that it needs to come to a full rolling boil, and it needs to be over the top. So don't let it boil for so long or have the water so shallow that the jars start to stick out of the water. That's a good rolling boil. So now that your jars have been processing for 10 minutes in the boiling water bath, it's time to take them out. So just get your jar lifter. You don't want to burn yourself. Take your jars, one at a time. Put them on a tea towel so you catch all the drips of water. Make sure there's space in between the jars so they can air cool. And leave them to cool down naturally. Don't do anything to make them cool down faster. Once again, you can crack the jars. They will, as they cool, you'll actually see the lids will pop down. These lids are safety pop-top lids. So right now they're domed up. They will actually suck down, and you can tell just by looking at the jar that you've got the vacuum that you need. So now you're done. Let the jars cool down, and once they are cool, you can label them and store them in your pantry for as long as you like. Once you open them, keep it in the refrigerator. It's going to last about 30 days. So that's sugar-free raspberry jam. Really easy to do, absolutely delicious, and safe for diabetics or anyone who doesn't want to be a diabetic. Enjoy.